Hello and welcome back to Planet 40k. Today we're going to be looking at the Sicaran Omega tank, which is available for your Space Marine players. You're going to find the datasheet in the Imperial Armour Compendium book due to the fact that it's a Forgeworld model. So let's jump straight into this actual datasheet for this tank. So it's coming in at 10 power level or 175 points base cost. There will be some extras in the war gear section which we'll go over later in the video. Now it's got some pretty decent stats. It's got a movement of 14 inches, weapon skill 6+, of course, ballistic skill 3+, strength 6, toughness 7, wounds 14, attacks 3, leadership 8 and a 2+ save. So pretty quick for a heavy support option, and toughness 7 with a 2+ save with 14 wounds to go through. That's pretty tanky. Now it does have a degrading stat line. When it drops to 6 wounds remaining, it will half the movement to 7 inches, go to ballistic skill value of a 4+, and D3 attacks, and the attacks aren't that important really. And then when it drops to 3 wounds or less, the movement goes down to 4 inches and the ballistic skill goes to a 5+. So that's the two important parts there. Now in terms of the actual war gear, the Sicaran Omega is equipped with a heavy bolter and a mega plasma array. So let's check those options out. Of course the heavy bolter, we all kind of know what this is. It's 36-inch range, heavy 3, strength 5, -1 AP and 2 damage. So really decent when you're firing at toughness 4 infantry, especially Space Marine infantry or similar kind of models that have got 2 wounds. You're likely going to be wounding them on 3s, possibly 4s if you're going against tougher units such as Death Guard Plague Marines for example, but overall it's a decent infantry killer. Now onto that big gun that you can see on top of the actual model, which is the Omega Plasma Array. This comes in 2 profiles because it's a plasma weapon of both 36-inch range, both heavy 6, so there's no D6 here, it's just a straight 6 shots. Strength 8, -3 AP and 2 damage, or if you're supercharging it will go to strength 9, -3 AP and 3 damage, and if you do roll a 1 when you're supercharging it, it's only a mortal wound. You're not going to remove the model, just 1 mortal wound there. Not too bad of a risk, especially if you're going against toughness 8, so you'll still be wounding on 3s. And you get the extra damage as well. Now there are some options here in terms of the war gear options. So the first one is you can equip 2 heavy bolters or 2 las cannons. Now we've already gone through the heavy bolter option, but you can get 2 additional heavy bolters, resulting in 3 heavy bolters for the actual tank. It's going to cost you 30 points to add on the 2 heavy bolters, but that's going to be 9 strength 5 shots at 2 damage, which is pretty good. Or alternatively you can take 2 las cannons for a total of 40 points, which is going to give you 2 strength 9 shots, although the damage will be D6, but that's going to add quite nicely to your plasma array for some anti-tank. So depending on what way you want to go, you can go with anti-infantry or anti-tank, the options are there. To further add to this, you can take the Hunter Killer Missile for only 5 points. That's going to have that strength 10 weapon with D6 damage again. It's only a once per use range weapon, but it's got a 48-inch range, so you whack this out on turn 1, especially when you're in the Devastator Doctrine as well. Then finally you can add a single Storm Bolter for 5 points, Rapid Fire 2, Strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. I'd probably only bother with this one if you've got 5 points remaining and you don't know what to spend it on. Other than that though, I wouldn't bother. Now in terms of the abilities, Angels of Death of course, because it's a Space Marine. There's only really one ability from the 4 from Angels of Death that's going to have any effect, which is the Combat Doctrines. So you're going to have added AP depending on what doctrine you're in. So for example, turn 1 in the Devastator Doctrine, all the heavy weapons will get an additional AP. It's also got the Martial Legacy ability. Unfortunately, this is going to cost you a command point just to field it. Because it's a Forgeworld model, they standardly come with this Martial Legacy ability. It's almost like taking a Super Heavy Auxiliary Detachment, although it will be in your heavy support. Then finally, it's got the Explode ability because it's a vehicle, so once it's destroyed, on a roll of a 6, any units that are within 6 inches will suffer D3 mortal wounds. That will include your own model, so you've got to be careful of that. It is quite handy if you've got lots of enemy units within an engagement range and they've just taken out your tank, then you can just blow up in their face. Then finally onto the keywords. It's got the Imperium keyword of course. It's got the chapter keyword, so it can go into any chapter. It's a vehicle. It's got the smokescreen keyword as well, which is going to interact with a stratagem. So we'll go on to the stratagems now. Starting with that smokescreen stratagem, you can use it for a command point in the shooting phase, and the enemy units that are targeting this tank, it'll be a -1 to hit. Or it's got Armor of Contempt because it's a vehicle. Again, it's 1 command point. You can give it a 5+4 no pain save against mortal wounds, which you could technically use to save your mortal wound that you've done against your supercharged plasma weapon if you've rolled a 1. Now as for some unit synergy, you've got the Tech Marine. I've just put the Primaris Tech Marine here, but you can use any Tech Marine really. With the Blessing of the Omnissiah ability, they can be repairing D3 lost wounds to your tank, and also they can be giving you a +1 to your hit rolls if you're within 3 inches of a Tech Marine. And if you want to further boost this Tech Marine, you can change them to a Marshal of the Forge, so instead of bringing back D3 lost wounds, it'll just be a flat 3. And finally, if you wanted to put an in-run save on your tank, because it does lack an in-run save, you can get Librarian librarian with the librarian's discipline, using the psychic fortress psychic ability to give it a 5+ inf save if it's within 6 inches of a librarian. Now as for some chapter synergy, I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there's a few here that I wanted to go over. First of all, the Black Templars. With the new Templar vows, you're going to be putting 5+ invulnerable save army wide, so that will include this tank, and also it can't be wounded on less than a 3+. So if there's any strength 14 or more weapons out there, they're going to still need a 3+ to wound it. If you're using him for a Dark Angels chapter, of course if he stays stationary, he's going to get a +1 to hit naturally with Grim Resolve, so he can be hitting on 2s with all his range capabilities, which isn't too bad at all. And if you're going with the Imperial Fists, you can take all those heavy bolters, and any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will score an additional hit, and also the enemy units will not get any benefits of light cover for the attack. And also in the Devastator Doctrine, if you fire in your heavy weapons against vehicles, then you can add 1 to the damage, which could be pretty crucial for that battle round. Alternatively, you could be playing Iron Hands with your tank, so you can have a 6+ feel no pain save, and also the amount of wounds you've got left on your data sheet is going to be considered double for determining what characteristics you've got, so you're not likely going to be getting bracketed with your Sicaran and Mega. They've also got a bit of synergy with their actual Tech Marines as well. And then finally, the Ultramarines. It gives you the option of falling back and shooting, although you can still shoot into combat with this tank. However, if you wanted to select your own target, you've got the option of falling back, and it will be a -1 to hit. Unless you're using the fall back and re-engage stratagem, then it won't be a -1 to hit. So that's all the chapters I wanted to talk about today. Let's get on with the summary for the Sicaran and Mega. Starting with the good, it's pretty quick for a heavy sport at 14-inch movement. And of course it's a vehicle model, so it can be moving and still firing as normal. It's got 14 wounds with toughness 7 and a 2+ armor save, so it's pretty tanky. It's going to take quite a bit to take it down. Now it's not invincible by any means, but it's definitely not a pushover, and they're going to have to put quite a lot of firepower into this tank. It's got a lot of DACA, we've already mentioned all the weapons, and it's quite versatile in terms of those weapons. You can either go with anti-infantry, taking 3 heavy bolters as an example, or you can go anti-tank, taking the 2 las cannons. On top of that, a mega plasma array as well, and that plasma array doesn't have any D6 weapons, it's just a flat 6 shots regardless of the profile you use, which is pretty sweet. You're going to be doing a lot of damage, and then even a hunter-killer missile too. Supercharging it with the mega plasma array and getting hot by rolling 1s, there's only going to be 1 more to wound, so it's not the biggest deal there, whereas some units just simply get destroyed, whereas this tank just takes a mortal wound. And then finally it's got the smoke screen stratagem as an option just to keep it up and running, give it a bit of survivability. Now as for the bad, once you start putting all the upgrades on, whether it's double las cannons or double heavy bolters, it does get quite pricey. It goes way beyond 200 points. I still think it's relatively cheap overall, but you just got to remember that although it is 175 points at base cost, it does start to add up when you put these weapons on. It's got the martial legacy ability, so it's going to cost you a command point, which isn't always ideal, especially in the lower points games where you don't have many command points to start with, although you do get 1 back each turn. It's got no invulnerable save. Now there are ways of putting an invuln save on them, but as standard it doesn't have one, and it's got the degrading stats of course, which you've always got to put as a negative point. Once it starts to lose wounds, it's going to start to lose its effectiveness, especially with that ballistic skill going down. Due to the fact it's a tank, it's not going to offer anything in melee. It's got weapon skill of a 6+ and only 3 attacks, although it will be strength 6, but it's not going to be doing much. You can't expect it to be doing much in melee. It's not core of course, so buffing it can be difficult. There still are ways of buffing the tank, but it's not going to be as straightforward as getting a captain out and giving it rerolls of 1s for example. Then the final point here is if you are supercharging with that plasma array with 6 shots, you will likely on average roll a 1, so you'll always be getting a mortal wound on average when you're supercharging. So that's the summary. Let's get on with the actual rating for this Sicaran and Mega. For me this is a top tier tank, so I'm going to give it a 4.5 star rating. This competes with the Sicaran Punisher for me, right up there with some of the best stuff. Now, the only reason it's not got a 5-star is simply because it's not a Redemptor Dreadnought. It can't be fighting back in combat, but in terms of its range capabilities, it's definitely top tier. That's what I think. Let me know what you think below. Would you give it 5 stars? Would you give it less than 4 stars? Let me know below. Remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.